Welcome to another episode of TPM Ridge, the podcast where we bring in industry leaders in technical program management to share their insights, experiences, and the lessons they've learned on the front lines of the TPM movement. I'm your host, Doran Katz, and each week we dive in deep into the methodologies, mindsets, and tools that will empower you to drive excellence in technical program management. Whether you're new to TPM or looking to take your skills to the next level, this podcast is your go-to resource for transforming TPM principles into real-world success. Welcome everyone to our second episode of the season, and we have our regular and irregular panelists on our show today. Regular Michael, well, he wasn't here last time, but Michael got, so I want to introduce him. He'll introduce himself shortly. But we've got Josh, and we've got our guest speaker, and David as well, who'll be all chatting about some of the topics that he posted on his LinkedIn a while back, so, on the state of TPMs in 2025. Before we get started, let's send it over to Michael. Tell us a bit about yourself and life at Celonis.
All right. Thanks for having me back, or I'm glad to be back on season 2. I think you call it that way, Doran.
Yeah.
So I'm leading TPM at Celonis, which is a company focusing on process mining, process intelligence. Literally built the TPM team from scratch because we had the necessity in a growing product and engineering team, also specifically during pandemic. We had more complexity, more dependencies, more cross-functional programs. I had the pleasure, when I was product manager, to spend time in the US, and then I got the attention, got to know Josh, and got to know many in the community. And I started the team very slim and platform, and then scale it globally to 20 plus TPMs, which is quite a healthy ratio. I'm looking forward what the trend is for what we're discussing today, and I'm glad to be back on season 2.
Well, we're glad to have you. And definitely, I'd say it'd be a great topic to talk about building a TPM team from scratch. I think that's something that folks will be interested in. So we'll have to remember to get back to that at some stage, right?
Josh owns me the upload on YouTube from the first TPM summit. I spoke about that, but time for a refresher, definitely.
Of course.
Is it not on YouTube? It should be on YouTube.
Yeah.
I'll go check.
Link. We'll post the link in the show notes. So
Yeah.
We'll get to that. And with us today, we have David Rifkin. Did I get that right?
Yeah, Rifkind. Both. It's okay.
Well, very kind. NVIDIA. And also on the West Coast in Washington, the great state of Washington.
Yep. Well, hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I'm a technical program manager. I work with various SRE teams at NVIDIA on a lot of cross-functional projects, some of which are AI related and some of which are sort of your traditional lift and shifts and migrations and adoptions. So really excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'd love to have you here. And of course, we have a lot to talk about. Before we jump in, Michael, I know you wanted to have some points you wanted to cover first. Is that right? Or is that later on?
We can do that. I would give the stage first to David, to talk about the inspiration and what I find amazing. You talk to 80 TPMs. I would be glad if there are well-known people to outline a little bit his thought process on that, and we can deep dive into the topic literally.
Yeah. So I put together this, fairly small piece on LinkedIn on the state of TPMs. And it was sort of the culmination of an interest of mine to get more about what's happening in the TPM world. And I put a post out on LinkedIn just asking people if they wanted to connect, if they were interested in finding out more about my story, what I'm seeing and what they're seeing, and if they needed help as well. I'm really passionate about the TPM space. I feel in many ways TPM is sort of the hidden driver for a lot of major projects and programs throughout the industry. And wow, the response was somewhat overwhelming. And I just sort of made it a mission to try to talk to as many people as I could. And what was very interesting about it was many people were TPMs. A big chunk also were not. And a lot of folks were from tech, banking, a couple from healthcare, areas that I just wouldn't assume I would get any form of outreach, and in some cases government as well, which I found fascinating. Very different sort of skill set that you see with TPM there. And everyone has sort of a different view on what's happening and what they're experiencing. And I think that kind of aligns well with the TPM experience. As you're going through your programs, every program is unique. Every challenge you run into is one of a kind. And how you translate that into your own personal experiences as TPM and navigate it is what like ultimately hearing it was 80 unique stories about different programs and projects that were going on. So that was sort of the motivation behind everything. And I kind of broke it down into a couple of different areas. Were sort of major themes. A lot of people are looking for different challenges and a new role right now. And I think just given with the current state of where TPM is at in the tech industry, but not only the tech industry, but with banking, finance, healthcare, startups, it's a really difficult place to try to find a new role right now. And if you're jumping into that, you're in for the grind, I think.
That's very interesting. And I guess that was one of the first bullet points you had in your post, that people are interested in getting new roles, but unfortunately now it's kind of the reverse of what we had a few years ago, where it was the Great Resignation, and now we're kind of in a situation where people are staying put, and those who are trying to get into the TPM space or recent graduates are also finding it very difficult to join the workforce essentially in that role.
Yeah, I think a lot of respondents and folks that I talk to, and just to kind of frame it, right? Like I had a conversation when I would have a conversation with someone, it was sort of just like, very open-ended. You can imagine like connecting with a stranger over LinkedIn and making a plan to meet, and then you meet and you're like, oh, hi, I'm David. Like, who are you? And trying to break the ice and everything. But generally, 35 to 45-minute conversations and hearing about the challenges. So yes, I think the biggest challenge out there is sort of the job switch right now. And you're right, Dorian, it's the complete reversal from where we were at before. And sort of the rest of the points kind of do follow all of that, because it kind of lines up, right? Like program management, technical skill set, differentiating yourself, all kind of align behind trying to show that your value on changing your role or getting a brand new role somewhere in one of these companies.
What I find interesting is, and maybe like a little bit controversial, is like the question is like move or not move. But as a hiring manager, like when you put out like a job posting, you get literally swarmed by applications. So I find this like, we discussed it also like with my TPM managers. I find it like quite interesting that people don't like communicate to have an hesitation to move, but on the other side, like are willing to move. Is it just like sniffing the market, or is it like, are they really willing to move?
No, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, I think part of that is also, I think those actually play into each other, right? So right now, there's been a lot of layoffs as well, right? So we had a Great Resignation, which people are saying, I need something different. I need to move on. And then you pile a lot of layoffs on top of that. And then you have just a general contraction of the tech industry right now, where they're trying to do with more with less, right? So you have a very saturated job pool, people who are looking for jobs. And so people who still have a job or are sitting there, a lot of them are reluctant to move, right? Because, well, I'm secure, and I've heard from my colleagues that have been laid off, it's hard to find a position. So you have both. You have, I'm staying put, but they're staying put because it's so tight right now. So then when you do a job posting, you get a flood of applicants, but a lot of those people were displaced. Some of them are unhappy, but they realize that, well, I'll stay here until I find that new golden opportunity. And of course, you don't want to broadcast that to your manager, so they may pretend they're happy or outwardly, or maybe they are fine. They just want to see, I'm open or willing to look at other things. So, but I think that's a little different than in years gone by, where it was this typical, like, if you want to promote, if you want to move ahead, you go to a different company. So you had people that would just go back and forth from company to company, and it would just be like, step out the door, go join this company, step out the door, go join this company. And we're just not in that place anymore.
Definitely not. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think there's sort of three categories we're looking at the moment. Folks who have been displaced, folks who are unhappy and want to make a move, but may not be able to make a move, or they're concerned about making that move. New entrants, people who like the TPM space and they want to join being a TPM. Opening up, as a hiring manager, opening up that role, right? Like, especially with AI, like it's getting harder to kind of figure out who you're talking to, or whether or not the interviews are making sense, and whether the right candidate is the right person.
Before we get into what you can do as a TPM, new, aspiring, seasoned, those that have been displaced. Let's talk a little bit about what is happening right now, right? Like, do you see this as something that's cyclical? Do you see this directly as a result of AI that's going to change, indefinitely? Is this just a moment in time where the companies are trying to recalibrate and they're not quite sure how much to cut? Is this just compensating for the overhiring that happened during the pandemic? What do we think is happening here?
So, I mean, just this might be more, I mean, maybe less factual based, but just more opinion and what I've been seeing on the ground. I think TPM is a little bit less impacted by AI than some of the other fields, right? I think AI and where we're at with TPMs, you need multiple workflows to accomplish and achieve what we do as TPMs, right? Influencing without authority, alignment and coordination among multiple teams, aligning against a North Star and a vision and project initiation documentation and the whole bit of putting a program together. It's more than just like having a cursor or a Gemini. It's a workflow for us. So those tools are still developing, and I think it's going to take time. And I think the industry might, especially tech industry, might be kind of split between some companies really valuing TPMs and what they're doing to drive projects together, and some companies seeing less value from TPM. And there's been some companies recently that have made the shift away from TPM even, but I think that's less of an indicator, in my opinion. I mean, somewhat concerning, but I think TPMs are showing more value recently than they have in the past. And the demand for TPM is still there. Even some of the AI companies, if you just look on LinkedIn and check out OpenAI and Anthropic, they do have quite a few TPM roles open. And even in NVIDIA, the TPM role is growing. And so I think the trend is still either steady or growing for TPMs. And it could be cyclical, but at least at the moment, I think that's a good sign for TPM as a job set altogether.
So I want to add a few things to that, and especially about the kind of the state of where we're at versus the cyclical nature. And I just did a quick search to make sure I got this right in my head because I was fairly certain. The tech bust, if you will, the current slump that we're in started in April of 22. It hit in April, stocks just plummeted. And a lot of that was a reaction of coming out of the deepness of the pandemic, where we heavily distributed, went remote everywhere, hired wherever people were at. And then as people started going outside again, started opening things back up, right, we started to contract, where all of a sudden a manager who has an office in Seattle, but their people are everywhere around the globe, that it makes it harder to manage that in those scenarios. So you get that retraction there. And then in October of 22, Chat GPT makes its debut, or November of 22. So then that compounds into it. And then we start down this snowball of AI. And I think those two things have just, normally we would have, I think, recovered from the pandemic, if you will, like that. I think that would have balanced out already. But you add on top of that the AI movement, and it's just put us in a weird spot. Cyclical nature, to me, I see it as product versus program. And I know some people kind of disagree, but what you're seeing with some of these groups that have gotten rid of their program manager, it's because, and if you look at their manifestos, they're saying product is our focus. Program managers are too wide thinking. We want to be focused on our product. That's where we're at. But at the same time, literally within those same months where people were saying that, you had others who were saying, our product folks are thinking way too far down the road, and they're not in the here and the now. They're not executing. So I don't want my product managers. I want my program managers. So you're seeing a little bit of both, depending on where you are in the need of your company, right? And I think, to me, that's really where it boils down to is, what do you need as a company? Are you product focused? Are you more execution driven? Or are you a good balance between the two? And it really just depends on where your company is in its own life cycle. I think startups in a lot of cases would value from a TPM because they need to execute quickly. You get a little bit further down the road where you're a little more established and you need to think about the product in that longer term. So I I think we're needed. I think, like to David's point, you're seeing a lot of companies really starting to strengthen their TPM role. The other issue I'm seeing, and this is part of the problem with these graduates, is a lot of the larger established tech companies are no longer interested in entry level or even lower industry level TPM roles. They're wanting those senior staff, principal levels because they want someone to come in, hit the ground running, already know exactly what we're doing, highly specialized. You see this joke of like, all these job postings are looking for entry level with 15 years of experience. It's the same with AI. They want people who have used AI to do transformative things. Guys, it's been out for a year and a half. You're way over indexing and shortening your pool of available labor by doing that.
Yeah, also what David mentioned, like in his article about differentiation and so forth. Like one point, like before, like we move on, Dorn, is like when you see the AI tools, I think like it's very experimental, and you see like also like when you follow TPMs on LinkedIn, like it's a very interesting like observation when you like see your feed on what is out there, what people are experimenting around. Like everyone has different use cases, and I think it's highly driven by also the availability of tools that you have in the company.
Mm-hmm.
And the opportunity for TPM, I think, like lays a little bit in this melting pot. So on the one side, like you have tools that are developed for product managers to be faster. So make it cursor, like you go in there, you do a little bit of Figma style, you launch your app. And on the other side, like you have engineering, like where you have like Copilot and those like helper AI tools. And they come together in a melting pot, and there's like a short overlap. And I think for a TPM, where the opportunity lies is I think you can do a lot of things what you have available in order to summarize and go a little bit like deeply embedding it into the workflow, which is the next step. But what is like helping and what I see currently is like many focusing so much on their product in isolation, but the TPM always like is dragged in and say, hey, this is a dependency, this is a cross functionality. I know the stakeholder. So there's a lot of this, like, I think what is out there, like always called this human component and this like brain thinking where AI is like still not there. And I think there's also an opportunity to maybe revisit like next year or this year, Josh, the discussion on what is a TPM really? I think like this good old discussion, like to pick that up and how does it fit into the new world?
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of differentiating yourself, David, in your post, you mentioned that basically some TPMs have tried to differentiate themselves with a GitHub page, portfolio of work. They take on different projects where they have lower competency and then try to bridge that, or try to go cross-functional, dabble in cybersecurity, all that stuff. Tell us a little bit about what you found in that conversation.
Yeah, there are. I would say that this is sort of the area with the least amount of differentiation, the least amount of people who have actually differentiated themselves, I guess is the way to put it. Folks or TPMs are maybe nervous to jump out of their comfort zone and start working on a cybersecurity program. And I can totally understand that, right? Like in certain cases, running a security program requires a different skill set and mindset than it would if you are supporting SREs or your traditional software engineering agile approach to how you're working. And I think there's a lot of value though for moving from your comfort zone into some of these areas. One way or another, most programs you're going to be working with security. And one of the most difficult areas at times can be working with security. Having that skill set, understanding how the security team is thinking, what kind of tools they're using within your organization. If you run a program or two, right, you're going to get different experiences. You're going to have this varied view on things, especially if you're looking for a new role. Having that mix of going broad in the organization can be very powerful for a TPM. And even if you're not looking for a new role, even if you're just staying in the same spot, understanding the different players in your organization, how they're operating, what they're looking for, it gives you the ability to unblock your program at certain times when you're running into these walls. So it's something that I put out there, right? Give yourself that level of breath. Allow yourself the chance to go and run various different programs. For example, myself at NVIDIA, I get my hands on with AI, but I never get the chance to play with like protocols. Like it's just my own personal area that I really enjoy, but NVIDIA is filled with this type of stuff. So I joined the Model Context Protocol working group at NVIDIA, and I helped to support that, right? And I increased my learning about MCP and what's going on there, and maybe deep dive into server-side events. And it's nobody's assigning it to me or anything, but I'm just going out and spending some additional time to help bring a working group together. And it could be as simple as that. And you meet people from all over your organization. And so I think that level of differentiation is really important right now for TPMs. to get that experience, and it'll just pay dividends no matter what you're doing later on.
Yeah, before the rest of the guys here chime in, one thing you mentioned, which was really interesting when you talk about cybersecurity and, not necessarily having the background, but it's a very important and difficult area. With AI, that's certainly not going to go away. With AI, you're definitely going to have to learn how to navigate security, ethics, all sorts of stuff that will come up. It'll probably amplify that even more, if anything. So,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, what do you guys think? Josh, Michael?
I can take a start. So I would agree what David said. I would call it maybe embrace ambiguity. So I also started out. I'm a big fan of platform infrastructure topics, because I know it's tough and I can learn a lot. But along the journey of building the team, see a little bit a cycle in TPMs. They know after 6 to 9 months their stuff. And then they continue as is. But if you build an environment where people can also say hey, and this is the very charming thing about cross functionality is that you can within your program get to know other areas and sparkle an interest, but then also swap TPMs over so that in a radical case, someone who a TPM who does front end is now going into a platform program, which might be a tough journey for the individual and a hard time. But if you have an environment, and I think this is more neutral, I think in both startups where you do literally everything up to bigger corporates where you have a lot of opportunity to change. But I can fully embrace everyone to take a program outside of the comfort zone after 1.5 years, just to get to know new people, to get to know a new topic. Maybe we can ground cybersecurity in level 9000 program, but why not go for it? I mean, if you have a supportive environment, then I can highly recommend to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I was TPMing mostly in product software development. That was my engineering background. But, my recent role here at Walmart is my first foray into SRE. I've never done anything with SRE, and this is a very horizontal role, and it could be taunting, could be scary, sort of get into this whole area of working, a bit DevOps, a bit, SecOps, and the sheer breadth of that is challenging. But I think, we're all should be, long life learners, students, I guess. And I think it's important to keep on evolving and learning and seeing where things are going and seeing how to make yourself, relevant, challenge yourself.
Yeah. I think, Michael, when you mention if you have a supportive environment, right, I think that's kind of key here. One of the things that I've seen, in talking, a lot of the larger corporations, not only do they not want entry level TPMs, they don't want graduate level, they don't want even just level 1. They're looking for those seniors, principals, staffs, those sort of things. But along with that, they're expecting some level of specialization already. So if you're coming from the outside into a company, from their perspective, there's a very high risk profile of, do I hire this even if they're, a principal level or a staff level, but they know nothing about security and they know nothing about our company, right? So that to them is a very high risk, and they're starting to filter heavily on that. So your best inroads to making that shift is within the company that you're already at. So, at that point, your risk profile goes down because you know the company, right? You've proven yourself because you're there. And so then all you're doing is making that one shift of, hey, I don't know anything about security, but I know how to be a TPM at this company. I've been here for however long. So there's some level of vetting there that exists. So they're more likely to bring you on. Even in those cases, though, there are some scenarios where I think gaming is a really big one. I want to go work in video games. If you've never worked on a video game, they're likely not going to touch you, right? Even within somewhere tangential within that company. So there are certain specializations that I think are becoming hyper specialized. So I think to David's point and Michael, to yours, if the support is there, wholeheartedly do it. Because you need to branch out. You need to get out of your comfort zone, because that, if the industry could see it clearly, that is our strength, right? Cross-functional is not just a soft skill. It's also our ability to go into a new technical environment because we have a technical foundation and latch onto that new technical concept and grow from it. Not everyone can do that, but TPMs, we're good at it, right? That's what makes us successul.
Yeah.
And I strongly believe that. Go ahead, Doran.
So, Josh, on what you said, that totally makes sense. What if you're in an environment or in a role where you don't have that support? What do you suggest, or what do you recommend to somebody, in this environment right now, their heads down and doing whatever they're doing, and they want to, spread their wings, I guess.
Classes, I think, are a big one. Yeah, and that's true for someone coming out of school. Like, you don't have a portfolio yet to prove yourself. Like, I got a 3.9 GPA. Look at me. Okay, good for you. Show me your worth. So having those certifications in your belt at least show that you can put in the focus and that you understand the basics, to where you're not coming in completely dark to some new area, and that you're willing to learn. And then also find, as David did, reach out, find other TPMs, find other people in those areas that you're interested in, strike up conversations and get to know them, get to know that space. Do what you can to branch yourself out to where you have some understanding of those areas that you're interested in.
One of the ways that I kind of got started when I knew I wanted to move more towards the program management space was to find an open source project that I was really interested in. And the good thing about open source projects, generally speaking, is you don't need to ask permission to help. You can jump in and you can do some things. Sometimes it's better to ask before you just jump in and start organizing a project board. But most of the time, I think many open source projects, particularly on the smaller side, would love to have someone come in and put together a backlog, talk through what their documentation looks like, and just take on some of those TPM related tasks and help out there. So that might be one way that TPMs could, if they have time, to differentiate themselves and jump on some of those projects if they're not in an environment that is as supportive. So just another area to explore.
And talking about practical examples, like I had a different route, like to TPM. I know the role exists. And I was like, I knew like I want to build like a team around, but I need to do like a lot of like IC work at the beginning. And this is like when I was like reaching out to, like, also on LinkedIn, like to gazillion of TPMs, talking to them how that works, like to tailor it a little bit like to our like company stage where we have been. What I heard like also a lot about what TPMs are doing, that struggle on the one side like to enter, and on the other side like to have like less maybe knowledge on system designers, participation in hackathons, or you can also like go for like online coding challenges. And this is like were also like two things. But I agree also to choose like certifications might help, although they might be costly, but this might be like an low cost alternative to participate in hackathons or coding challenges.
Yeah, I would say the great thing that we're living in this day and age is that with AI and open source is that you can get an open source project, and people are generally very nice in open source. Their understanding of people who are new to coding or not as experienced. But with AI, you can also get it to break down and explain what it's doing. What's this? What's happening here? So it's not just about vibe coding, but about using it to help you navigate. So it's a great guardrail, I would say, and lowers the barrier of entry as well. So it's a great opportunity in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. Most projects are out on GitHub, and GitHub AI Copilot, I believe it's called.
Mm-hmm.
You can literally just ask Copilot about the project that you have access to and start working through it. And if you have a Discord, you've got everything you need to kind of start organizing everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a little addition to the AI thing. So prior to AI, this is kind of similar to me in the way that I use Wikipedia, right? It's not your source of truth. It's your starting ground. You go there to learn something, and then you take that, and often what happens is you learn there's some key insight. Maybe it's a key piece of jargon or some industry term that you can then latch onto and then take that and go to that next step, because now you know how to ask the right question. I had been using AI recently at home, working on some side projects, working on a game, and I asked Copilot, I'm like, hey, I want to do this thing. And I had like 2 paragraphs of what it was I was trying to do. Turns out what I was doing was actually a fairly standard idea. In the gaming industry, I didn't know it. I didn't know it was a standard idea, but it understood what I was asking for, and it came back and said, "Oh yeah, this concept it's this idea of auto tiling. It's like auto tiling. Here's all these different methods on how to use it." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So then I was able to take that and then go a step further and dive deeper and become more refined. And so instead of vibing on it, right, instead of just taking its output and moving on, you're using it to learn and explore and to take that output and then move on and refine it yourself.
Yeah, but that's kind of what's happening, I guess, if you're a TPM working, in the office, you're kind of learning from your engineers. So in this space here, you're kind of learning from the AI tool concepts, and as you're kind of managing it, you're telling it, you're giving it requirements, and you're kind of learning that way. Yeah.
You just have to understand enough to gut check, right? You don't take it for face value. You don't take Wikipedia for face value. I mean, it's highly accurate, but you still go check those primary sources, right? You still go verify those things. And so when AI says, here's your method, it works, it compiles, great. Does it compile? But does it actually do what you expected it to do? And you go running like, oh, it's 80% there. Cool. I'll go tweak it.
Yeah.
Like so engineers, you have to have that.
Like engineers, they are confident as well, and they tell you they've done it.
Right, fair. Yeah. It's done, but it's not done. Yeah.
Basically done. And you added like something like to your personal toolbox, which you not have known before. And like if you pick up the cybersecurity example, you can do like similar things like break it. But when do you launch the game?
Oh, my goodness. One of these days.
All right.
Updated. I've got my Steam account ready.
Right.
Well, we're going to have to do a podcast, maybe walkthrough of how to create a game as a TPM or something like that. I know we're running out of time. We only got a few minutes left. So let's do a lightning round here on the last point that you had, David, in your post. And that was TPMs are underestimating investment in the program management skill sets. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So some of the things just from what I've heard from TPMs doing during their interview practice, feedback that they've gotten, and just what they're working with internally, they're struggling with at least what I call the program infrastructure. And program infrastructure means like the set of documents, for example, that you use to organize your program, right? You think about like your raids, your roles and responsibilities, forming the program, putting your work streams together, people in charge for each work stream, your metrics, and bringing this all together and investing in how do you do that? How do you go from that phase that Michael mentioned, where it's like the ambiguity, you don't know what you need to achieve, to having that set of documentation, structuring a program, and then putting it out there for approval and moving your team forward. That skill set, we're taking for granted. And when you walk into an interview or when you walk into a role switch, being able to tell the story of how you do that in a repeatable manner and really taking the ambiguity and making it concrete. All that is a skill set by itself. And what I've discovered is that TPMs are struggling with the process for how to do it. I totally understand why. Each time you face that ambiguity, it's different. And there's no like certification around to say like, how do you go from, a concept to a program that's well structured. And so investing in that skill set to figure out what is my plan for a plan? How do I get to the point where I can put down what it is we need to achieve concretely in order to move forward with this program? TPMs need more investment in that and making sure that they can do it in a repeated manner and ultimately be able to explain their story when you do a program deep dive in something like an interview. So that's really what it kind of comes down to. And that's, I think, practice and facing really difficult challenges. Although I could say that I had one person who was a consultant for a top 5 consultancy. And this was their strongest point. I guess like no surprise there. They've struggled on other things. And they just literally would work on programs using like the McKinsey framework, which is out there and free to use. And I found that kind of fascinating. So if there are TPMs out there that are struggling with this, I thought it was a really amazing point that you can go out and just maybe mimic as a framework to get you started, like whatever it is that McKinsey is using, or Bain or BCG, or I don't even know if those are the top 5. But it's a fascinating sort of view on things. And the investment in that. This is less about, and maybe a little bit, like some folks reported having trouble with things like critical path, but I feel like that's an easier thing to overcome with some practice than some of the other challenges of working with ambiguity.
Yeah. And Monte Carlo isn't just a casino in you go and gamble, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's definitely, we talk about differentiating, then this is definitely an area you also have to build and continue to build in. And we'll have a lot of podcasts that will definitely go through these areas in our backlog. But Josh, Michael, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I leverage like my background. So I'm originally like from Germany, now living in the US. So like Germans are very structured, and I'm a little bit obsessed in the TPM craft of having like for one program, one document, and it's modular based. And this is like what you can also like give, for instance, like junior TPMs to say like use this modules when. And the nice thing is like really I think most people have access to Notebook LM, like you just pump in like all master documents that staff senior principal TPMs have created, spill out the modules, and you have a good starting point. And the thing, it doesn't like you have structure, but I think like the structure is quite where you also like need experience, like how you manage that. But I think creating up a program from scratch is like you need to embrace the chaos, and you need to do it like once. It's like going through a launch process, going to like new program, like. But getting this program off the ground brings like, and from my experience, when you see TPMs and they have done it like once, they have the sign off for the program, like you see the sparkle in the eyes, and this gives also motivation for execution. So master document and modularized like helps a lot in order to stay structured without overhitting bureaucracy.
So I think it was John Cutler on LinkedIn yesterday or this morning did a post about vibe project management, kind of as a or vibe leadership. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing in the TPM world when it comes to project management, right? They have a technical background. A lot of us started out as software developers who were kind of forced to do a little bit of our own project management. They're like, I'm actually kind of good at that. I kind of like that. Let's transition to that. Right. But then they don't really know what project management means outside of the little bit they need when being a developer. So seeing that gap makes perfect sense to me. I think for me, when I saw that gap in myself, right, because I'm also a developer, that sort of thing, I went and got my PMP. And that wasn't because I think it's a superior product and that's the way you should do it. It was to give me foundational knowledge and understanding of what are these pieces. And the funny thing is, like, for those of you who know Amazon, there's really the saying of like, they don't like process for process sake. And so that you go in there, and one of the biggest problems you have is everyone does their own thing and they use whatever word they choose to use. But if you know the fundamentals of project management, you find out they actually do all of it. They just don't call it whatever PMP calls it. All of the pieces are there. So knowing that and having whether it is a modular document that's showing you all those pieces, because that's exactly what that is. It's here's your project charter, whether that's what you call it or not. Here's your RACI chart or your RAID or all of these components of who's doing it, why are we doing it, when are we doing it. Those are all of the pieces you need. So finding some foundation to go off of, I think is really, really important. Whatever foundation you choose to use, go learn it, but don't see it as a rigid, you must do this to succeed. It's just to expand your tool set and to give you the boxes to formulate from, because every program is going to be different. Every problem you solve is going to require that modular document to shift some. Every time I create a program status, it's different. I have a general template that I use, but I look at it and I'm like, oh, well, I have this one stakeholder that's he has a penchant for, what's happening over the next month. So I'm going to put a lot of thought in detail into what exactly is happening in this next month and then let things trail out. Or I have this one stakeholder that just isn't technical enough. So I'm going to weed out the technical words and make sure I'm twisting it to get that out. It's just going to change all the time. But if you have that foundation, you understand how those pieces connect, right? Then you can use that and be ad hoc in nature and mold those to what you need. But to your point, David, that is missing. But it's not that you have to do it in one way or another, and there's only one way to do project management. It's understand what that means, and no matter your framework, it's the same pieces.
Right.
They use different words, and maybe the boundaries are slightly different, but it's all the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter the framework that you're using, as long as you have something to help drive the ambiguity down into a program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, folks. And on that note, we are at time. This has been a great discussion. We can probably go on for another hour or two, and maybe we'll have to bring you back, David, and
Thank you.
we can go around too. Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming on, and this wraps up another episode. Josh, Michael, great having you guys on, and we'll look forward to you all in the next episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, and catch us on all your favorite apps, podcast apps. So enjoy the summer, guys, and we'll see you guys all soon.
Talk to you all later. Thank you.